That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Our theme for this month is liberty. You may have noticed that in the email this week. However, when the list of topics was originally published, it was liberation. So it's liberation that underpins my thoughts for this sermon today. And if I had to pick one word that has defined my life and shaped my philosophy and theology, it is liberation. From an early age, I was influenced by the radical movements of liberation. I became so engaged with the concept that I majored in women's studies, which for me was and is liberation from oppression in all its forms. So liberation defines my spiritual beliefs and forms my humanist theology. I wonder if we're coming again into a time of liberation movements such as those that defined the 1960s. And that surely gives me hope. When I was a teenager, my friends and I decorated our bedroom walls with posters. Some of you may remember those days. My friends' walls were covered with Davy Jones and the Monkees and other pop singers. But I was drawn to a different group, those who were fighting for justice. The first poster I spent my babysitting money on was Angela Davis. I was in awe of her bravery and her political commitment, and I was afraid for her safety. Years later, I would study her book in women's studies. I was also drawn to the American Indian movement called AIM, which started in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I grew up. I was 14 or 15 when I saw a flyer on one of the light posts. They were good for that in those days. And I begged my mother to drive me to a presentation by Dennis Banks, who was not at that time famous. She begrudgingly agreed because the meeting was taking place at a local church. Hats off to my mother, because even though she had no idea what AIM was or why I would even be interested in such things, she not only took me, she stayed and listened and empathized with what he was saying. So I can't say why I was so drawn to these powerful liberationists, because no one else in my circle of influence had similar inclinations, even though images of people needing liberation surrounded us and bombarded us daily and weekly. Those of you remember Life magazine, and the cover every week had someone needing liberation. Photographs from the Vietnam War and the protests, the Watts riot in LA that sparked similar riots in cities across the country, including Minneapolis. I remember being scared for my father's safety as he drove to and from his downtown office. No one could convince me that the riots were in a completely different part of the city. Also, my religion of origin is Lutheran on both sides of my family. My parents weren't religious, nor were they committed to the little church we belonged to. It was only a place where they dropped us off every Sunday morning. I remember repeating the required creeds, but I can't bring them to my mind today. I may have repeated the words, but they didn't really have meaning for me. I didn't feel moved or satisfied by repeating them when it seemed to me the world around me was blowing up on fire and filled with injustice. I couldn't make sense of these two worlds, and I couldn't bring them together in any meaningful way. And certainly the minister wasn't able to open his message to try to bring those two worlds together. His sermons were lectures on obeying the biblical rules to get to heaven. He blithely ignored the cultural and political upheaval that was happening, and as a result, I believe he failed all his congregants. As an adult, I wandered a winding path before finding Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation and Unitarian Universalism. It's here where I can make sense of the moral importance of liberation. It's here where I find people who support me in accepting that our lives in this world are about how we live our daily lives in community. Each of our 7 principles seeks to expand community, to include every person and the environment. Our commitment is about moving the moral arc of the universe toward justice during this life, liberating humanity from greed and hatred and violence. My failure, I think, with regard to liberation is that I take it all so seriously. I can become negative and deeply saddened when it seems things are turning in a way that goes against the grain of that moral arc. I forget that life is about cycles and about laughter. My Facebook feed and National Public Radio dependency don't help me overcome that dependency. They don't really help me laugh and play. And when I was in graduate school at Ohio State University, the Wexner Center for the Arts hosted a screening of the controversial documentary called Paris is Burning. It was directed by Jenny Livingston, and it was filmed in the mid to late 1980s of drag ball culture of New York City. It chronicles African American, Latino, gay, and transgender communities. As such, it explores race, class, gender, and sexuality in America. In 2016, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It's an amazing film, and it gave me insight into a culture I was unaware existed and would otherwise have never known about. Drag and the elaborately structured ball competitions gave contestants a place to explore their creativity and create insanely gorgeous costumes and powerful personas. Paris is Burning presents drag as a complex performance of gender, class, and race, in which one can express one's identity, desires, and aspirations along many dimensions. For me, the film depicts drag culture as a form of liberation. Drag and the ball competition provided a space of acceptance for people who were rejected in other communities. The most controversial aspect of Paris is Burning is that it received funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, and one can imagine a similar response today. Additionally, while the main performers were paid, they felt unequally paid and wanted a share in the film's profits, but unfortunately they had signed a release of that in a contract. So they were unable to sue for what they felt their rights were. There is, of course, both criticism of and support for drag and its meaning about the performance of an authentic gender expression, but I'm more interested in the notion of liberation, both at the individual and societal levels. Thanks to the performer RuPaul, drag has become quite mainstream due to his wildly popular reality TV show called Drag Race, which is now in its 10th season. The show is very structured and includes challenges for the contestants and guest judges. RuPaul plays dual roles in the show, including RuPaul the drag queen, who has final word in judging, and RuPaul the man, who offers guidance to contestants for the challenges. Perhaps Drag Race is both a good thing and a bad thing. On the one hand, it has given drag a mainstream rank, taken it off the street, so to speak. On the other hand, the mainstreaming of drag popularizes a counterculture that is now commodified, such that it is no longer a source of liberation for the contestants. I'm not here to judge or to take a position. I'm more interested in finding awe in the insane creativity of the Drag Race contestants, and also in drag queens who perform live on stage in various venues, and even here in Phoenix. During the George W. Bush administration, RuPaul went underground and was not doing drag at all. He told Spin magazine that, "I went on Hollywood Squares in 1999, and I could tell that the audience, even some of the stars on the panel, there was a certain animosity towards me and what I was doing." RuPaul has also famously said, "We're all born naked, and the rest is drag." Who are we out there fighting for justice? I'm in awe of the commitment and creativity it takes to perform drag. I don't even perform my own self very well these days. I see the fact of Drag Race as a kind of sign that we're still okay because we're still able to accept different and other in our society. Perhaps Drag Race is a canary in the coal mine. The canary is still alive, so not everything has been sucked out from under us. Perhaps Drag Race can help us learn how not to take ourselves so seriously, or at least me, and lead us instead to laughter, acceptance, and creativity. One of my favorite movies is Kiss of the Spider Woman. The story takes place in a prison someplace in South America during a time of revolution. The two main characters are male and reside together in the same cell. One is gay, Molina, and the other is a revolutionary, Valentine. I can relate to Valentine because he takes the revolution so seriously. He's committed to the cause, and it guides his life and how he makes his decision. Molina, on the other hand, just wants to be free to love without persecution. Valentine is a liberator, and Molina wants liberation. Valentine loves a woman who is part of the bourgeoisie, and he feels so guilty about it that he disallows himself to love her fully. Molina can't understand because he has been imprisoned for loving a man. Molina receives a package of food from his mother that includes an avocado. In my favorite scene of the film, he carefully slices it for the two of them and offers a piece to Valentine. Valentine, of course, refuses to eat the fruit because he says disdainfully that it's a fruit of the bourgeoisie. Molina, disappointed, says, "What kind of a revolution is it that won't let you eat an avocado?" I believe we can do both. We can fight the fight, and we can eat the avocado. We can be revolutionaries in the business of liberation, and we can be humans enjoying our lives and raising our children. We don't have to give up one for the other. In a recent New York Times opinion piece, Dave Eggers writes, "But with art comes empathy. It allows us to look through someone else's eyes and know their strivings and struggles. It expands the moral imagination and makes it possible to accept the dehumanization of others. When we are without art, we are a diminished people, myopic, unlearned, and cruel." In the end, for me, it's all about the empathy for everyone, even those with whom we disagree. It's only through such action that liberation from oppression will one day be fully realized. This doesn't mean we have to just give up. It just means that empathy is hard, but the liberation depends on it. Blessed be.